Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Welcome. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for attending this marvelous session about an exciting subject, the IPOs. We have witnessed in the last couple of years a major surge in the IPO market with 71 IPOs successfully closed during the last couple of years, and 22 IPOs year to date in 2024, including the first fintech company in the main market in Tadawul. We expect definitely, inshallah, before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wa akhiran, more fintech companies and technology companies coming to the market in the next couple of years. And we will discuss today with our dear panelists the reasons. We'll start with Abdulaziz. Last 12 months, we have witnessed successful fundraising rounds in the private market with fintech companies with valuation over $1 billion in the market, making the private market a serious option to consider to raise fundraising versus the IPO. So for companies, private sector, private market versus IPO, what are your views on this?
Thank you. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you, Ziad, for your kind intro. And thanks a lot to Fintech Saudi and the regulators for organizing such an amazing event. I feel privileged and grateful for this opportunity to share our thoughts and experiences. Going back to your question around IPOs and fintechs, as you rightly mentioned, we have been lucky with the IPOs, having backed the only two VC-backed companies that actually went public on the Saudi Stock Exchange. I would say an IPO is not for every company. An IPO is costly and cumbersome, and you need to really think your options well before deciding on an IPO. Having said that, for fintechs specifically, I think it's critical to give it a closer look, because I think regulators like the transparency and the accountability that comes with an IPO. I think it's inevitable for any successful fintech company that wants to grow and scale to consider an IPO at some point. We've gladly been part of the recent fintech IPO, and I think we'll see many more to come. The private sector will be there, but nothing will give the quality of governance and transparency that comes with a public IPO.
Absolutely. So to make it successful, an IPO, a company should prepare for the IPO. And here comes the importance of the readiness. Khoya Nasser, Allah ينورك, when a company should start preparing for the IPO, according to you?
Shukran, Ziad. Again, I echo what Abdulaziz said. We thank Fintech Saudi for this amazing event and hosting us in this brilliant panel. Well, Ziad, I think we're biased, right? If you're going to ask me when should you be ready for an IPO, I'm going to tell you now. Now is the time to be ready for an IPO. No, but in all honesty, I think any startup thinking of going public and hitting the market, you should always keep in the back of your head being IPO ready. If I look at the market today, you have a fantastic regulatory and enabled regulatory environment. You have a Numu market that is very accepting of dynamic, emerging, up-and-coming companies. You have a main market with records of liquidities. We're seeing coverage ratios at triple, quadruple digits as we speak today. So in a nutshell, Ziad, I think any company that's thinking of going public, as Abdulaziz mentioned, not all of them would be considered to go public, is be prepared as soon as you can. Whenever you can hit the market, you can hit the market while running on the ground.
Absolutely. And I would add what to Khoya Nasser mentioned. Tadawul website provides you with extraordinary data for company who would like to start the preparation. Okay, and we'll cover this absolutely in the next point. So once a company is technically ready for IPO, they will be considering appointing a financial advisor. It's a very important decision, okay? And the question would be when a company could appoint financial advisor and what are the criteria. And we cannot have better than Amir Riyadh, the investment banker here in the panel, to answer this question. تفضل خوي أمير.
شكرا أخ زياد. So the IPO is a transformation journey for the company. I think it's very, very important that the company, before they appoint a financial advisor, to go through a readiness exercise, a readiness diagnostic, whereby they can assess their readiness to become a public company and to survive as a public company, be it from a corporate governance point of view, from a financial reporting point of view, from the financial statement production in accordance with IFRS, and so on. Once that is done, I think it becomes the role of the financial advisor to basically take them through the journey, work with them on appointing various advisors. I mean, obviously, when you go to the main market, there is financial due diligence, legal due diligence, market information that needs to be incorporated in the prospectus. And hence, he orchestrates that entire process for them. In selecting a financial advisor, I think, there are a number of important criteria that needs to be kept in mind. Obviously, the equity capital market experience, the team that's going to be working with you. Remember that you're going to be working with that investment bank for the next 9 to 12 months. So you have to feel comfortable with the team, and the team has to be there and try to resolve all the issues. And obviously, their ability to articulate the story of the company, which is what we call the equity story, and sell it to investors. So relationship with investors is also very crucial in this process.
Absolutely. And from your perspective, Khoya Salman, what are the key areas that a company, once appointing the financial advisor, should worry about when it comes to readiness before submitting the file to the CMA?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much, Abu Tariq. And it's an honor to be part of such a distinguished panel. So I'll tell you the 3 things that I tell every client, right, at the start of a process. From my perspective, one of them is high level, and the 2 others are a little bit more specific. From a high level standpoint, having the mindset of a public company and having the mindset of going through the IPO. So there's a cultural component to it. Particularly for tech companies, what made you successful as a tech company, as a startup, is not necessarily what's going to make you successful in the IPO process and post-IPO. So understanding that and understanding and preparing yourself from a cultural standpoint, I think, is extremely important. The more specific or granular is corporate governance, right? Corporate governance is extremely important. And the corporate governance regulations are the minimum, right? What you need to do as a company that is preparing for an IPO, maybe above and beyond what is just the bare minimum. So understanding that. The CMA, Tadawul, the regulators, they focus on related party transactions, for example. If you are a company, just because of the nature of your business, you have a lot of transactions with your shareholders, you have a lot of transactions with board members or companies that they represent, then obviously that's something to pay attention to and to make sure is covered from very early on in the process. And the other one is one that's important to me as legal as well as the financial advisor. It's the information gathering internally. The IPO process is a disruptive process. We will ask you for a lot of information. The FDD advisor will ask you for a lot of information. Having the internal resources to address that, making sure that you are efficient in how you are providing information will go a long way in making a process significantly more efficient. We have seen companies in the past not be ready for that. So we spend a lot of time very early on just getting basic information. Understanding that and understanding how that process works will be extremely important, and working with your advisors in a way to really get them the information that they need is extremely important.
Absolutely. It's the readiness for IPOs is the planning phase for the project. And like Japanese mentioned, it's 80% of the work. We have seen applications approved in 2-3 months because the company was ready, and بعد فضل الله سبحانه وتعالى وأخيرا the application was high quality. And with these great results, we are seeing a number of international technology companies, fintech companies specifically, considering listing in Tadawul and taking advantage of this favorable ecosystem. Khoya Nasser, do you have any advice for these companies to smoothly fulfill such requirements?
I mean, excellent question, and I'll maybe echo what Salman mentioned. I think having the mindset from a top level, whether you want to talk about the board level or the ultimate beneficiary owners of the cap table, generally speaking, I think that is the most important step towards swiftly going through the regulatory process, getting the necessary approvals, and so on. What we always want to focus on is you need to be, again, I'm reiterating myself, but you need to be IPO ready as early as you can. And as you mentioned, Ziad, if your file is ready, if your file answers all of the questions that the LDD advisor asked and the FDD advisor asked for, then your application will go smoothly. Now, obviously, there are listing rules and offering rules as well that I always recommend clients, companies to look into it in details. Now, obviously, you need experts on your team to make sure that you're ticking all of the boxes, because you don't want to submit a file and then realize that you haven't completed X assessment or Y assessment. So just one recommendation, hire the experts and make sure that you support these experts in answering all of the questions when required.
Yes, and you know, you mentioned an important point, Khoy Nasser. Each venue has listing requirements, and we have in Saudi, alhamdulillah, 2 venues, the main market and the parallel market, Numu. And usually companies, specifically technology companies, assess, you know, these venues, and the key question is, what's the optimal venue for that? So I would like to ask, you know, the investment banker here in the room, Amir, about his views. It is better to list on Numu or main market for a technology company, high growth company?
Thank you, Ziad. So I think the real choice depends on the specific needs of the issuer. Each market has requirements and caters to a different set of clients and different set of companies. So I would say in broad terms, the Numu market is geared toward earlier stage companies that are looking for growth capital. They can achieve this very successfully. The regulations and the requirements within the Numu market are much more flexible in terms of, you know, due diligence, financial reporting, etc., which caters to a company at an earlier stage of the process. And the good news is that they can always, over time, and meeting certain requirements of the Dawal, graduate from the Numu to the main market in a 2-year time span, provided they meet the requirements. Obviously, the main market is, you know, today, I mean, we are proud to have one of the most active IPO markets in the region, the biggest market capitalization, the biggest liquidity. So it's suited to larger companies that want to tap a very liquid market, very deep access to investor. We've also seen significant foreign interest participation in recent IPOs, which is a testament to all what is happening here in the kingdom that is, you know, going on the right track.
Khoy Nasser, anything to add on this subject?
Sorry?
Anything to add on this subject?
Well, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think
okay.
It's all about the details and peculiarity around the companies per se. At the end of the day, we've seen fintechs, obviously, that went to the main market. We've seen emerging technology companies that also went to the main market, and we've also seen emerging companies that opted for Numu. Couldn't agree more on the details that my colleague Amir mentioned. Most importantly, I think you need to weigh your options. Are you ready to comply with all of the regulatory requirements that Salman mentioned when it comes to the main market? Or are you at a stage in your growth area or growth stage or your runway where you need more flexibility? If flexibility is what you need, then obviously you would opt for Numu market, generally speaking. So again, I couldn't agree more. I think Numu is an attractive platform. The objective of Numu and the launch of Numu was driven by the vision, was driven by the fact that we want to become a capital source or a capital resource for startups, small and medium enterprises, and emerging technologies that obviously most of them that we see in front of us here today.
Absolutely. And we have witnessed, you know, the first technology company listed in Saudi in the Numu market, which was Jahez. and what make the success of Jahez is the equity story. And here comes the importance of the equity story for IPOs. In addition to readiness, the equity story, the growth story is an important aspect investor scrutinize. So the question to Akhoy Abdulaziz, based on your experience with Rasan and Jahez, how can what are the insights you can share with the audience about the importance of the equity story?
Absolutely. I think, as you rightly said, the equity story is the most important aspect of any equity offering you make. That's the number one thing investors look for and scrutinize. And what it is essentially is a way to capture the mission statement of a company and where the company stands in its journey and how well they have achieved their objectives in the past as a way to predict what they will do in the future. I think nothing says it. It's called a story because it's supposed to be engaging and capturing of all aspects of the company's growth and development. So it doesn't. I think there's no more important thing to explain in any equity offering than the equity story.
Amir, anything to add on this subject?
Yeah, I agree with Abdulaziz. So basically, the equity story is what creates the first impression about the company when you go and talk to investors. Although, as you know, in IPOs, there's a lot of disclosures around the company in the prospectus, but really you want to highlight what is unique about the company, why is it a good investment proposition, what is unique from a macro, micro, and from the key unique aspects of the company that investors should look at when considering an investment decision. So it's very central to the marketing exercise and the marketing efforts in an IPO, and the investment banks spend a lot of time together with the issuer and the other advisors to kind of craft this equity story and refine it as they go into the process.
Yeah, and the outcome of a successful equity story is an optimal valuation and an optimal coverage of the IPO. So the question is here, is the highest valuation, IPO valuation, is the optimal valuation? And I would like to hear, the views of the shareholders, like Abdulaziz AlOmran and Amir Riyad, the investment banker.
Okay, I can take a stab at this. So, valuation, I think textbooks tell us, and the empirical data tell us that IPOs are usually priced at a 20% discount to their fair value. I think it's even more important when it comes to tech companies because, especially the platform businesses, are dependent on many partners. I think nowadays IPOs not just reflect the value of the company, but they're also a way to forge partnerships with people you deal with, suppliers or customers. So I think, remember while you're pricing the IPO that it's, you need to keep something on the table. These are your partners. You need them to benefit with you, alongside you. It's not just a financial transaction. It's a relationship that will continue. So my thoughts is always underpriced.
Thank you. I think I would just like to add that this is the valuation. There is valuation and there is price. So valuation is the corporate finance valuation. We all can do discounted cash flows on the desktop and come up with the value of the company. But it takes more than that in an IPO situation to arrive at what the price is. This requires multiple investor engagement and education about the company and its growth prospects in order to optimize what is the value versus the price. I think just remembering the case study of Rasan, I think we had a challenge because this was the first insurtech fintech company to ever list on the main market. So unfortunately, there wasn't any truly comparable companies. So I think, with all the parties that were involved, we had to do, extra effort in investor education, research, reports to the investor, explaining the growth proposition. And then based on that, we were able to, achieve an optimal pricing for the deal based on very concrete investor feedback and people who actually voted with their money on what we think the valuation is. So this is how we think.
Yes, so in IPOs, valuation is what you expect, and the pricing is what you get. And the pricing definitely will come from the investors. And usually the question would be, should I consider a local offering where most of my investors are coming from the local market, or I should consider an international offering where I can I will be actively marketing the IPO to international investor. And the recent fintech company, Rasan, the international investor made, had a role to play in the IPO, and we'll discuss the success of Rasan IPO with the team here behind this success. But before that, I would like to hear Khoya Salman's views on local offering versus international offering. So, what do you advise the companies to consider?
From a local offering versus an international offering. From my perspective and where I stand, I really don't see a big delta in terms of what you need to do from a preparation standpoint or from a disclosure standpoint. If you look at our rules, they're actually very much disclosure heavy, right? So what you need to do and the prospectus that you're putting forward for a local offering is really not that different from an international offering. Now, obviously, there are a few things that you need to consider on the international side. There is what we call an international wrapper, so it's a little bit more additional things. If you were doing a 144A offering as opposed to a Reg S offering, the comfort package that the banks expect is a little bit more stringent. However, the delta is relatively, small when we talk about what are the differences between the two. And the big component is obviously who are you marketing to, right? Will there be that demand internationally for that company? My experience with particularly technology companies and fintech companies is there will be a much stronger international demand than maybe the purely local companies or companies that aren't seen as being as sexy or as attractive to an international investor.
Yes, and at the last, go ahead, Fadal.
If you allow me, I couldn't agree more. And I think maybe just to also add on what Salman mentioned, us as an exchange, we're an enabler at the end of the day.
Yes.
I mean, I'll leave it to the advisors when it comes to international versus local offering. But if you look at how the Saudi market opened up to the international investor community, you have thousands of qualified foreign investors that each manage at least $500 million US. And even if I look at their participation, is growing tremendously. You have billions of SAR invested in the local market. And specifically, and I agree with Salman on a specific point when it comes to technology companies, generally speaking. If you look at the emerging technology company listings that happened on the Saudi exchange, when the company hit the market, there was X number of % allocated to international investors. Instantly, within weeks or even months, you saw that grow tremendously.
Yes.
You even saw it grow sometimes even double where it was during the initial phase.
Yeah, you can share the Rasan numbers that are public numbers. I just want to add that anyone going through an IPO process, I think diversity in the type of investors you talk to is critical. There is no more important thing than diversity in the book. They're both important in getting a fair, a more realistic pricing view, and they're also important in creating liquidity post-listing. So I think make sure you have as much diversity in terms of the type of investors, whether international, local, small, big. The more diversity, I think, is always helpful.
Yes. And for Rasan IPO, the offering structure was one of the key success factors. What are the success factors we have seen, and to make this IPO successful, Abdulaziz?
I think the industry, uniqueness of the company and the unique position it's in, and the lack of representation for this type of companies in our market, I think played the big role. Of course, we saw big demand from local investors, from partners, insurance companies, and the likes. But it also captured the attention of investors that are always always underweight technology in the region because they didn't have enough avenues to invest. I think what such listings offer are important, and we need to see much bigger representation of technology in the index.
Yes, and in IPOs, it's a teamwork where you have all the stakeholders adding value to the success. So we have the regulator, we have the investment banker, the legal advisor, shareholders, and I would like to hear your views, individually, because you, بعد فضل الله سبحانه وتعالى وأخيرا, you have, witnessed the success of this IPO. What made it successful, Khoya Nasser, based on your experience?
And I think, for me, I think having this dream team, I think, of course, made it successful. But I just wanted to make that comment. And also,
لا لا بالعكس, couldn't agree more. I think, again, if you have the right product and you have the right investors, you have the right advisors, you can make wonders happen. You have, at the end of the day, again, I'm biased, but you have an enabling also regulatory ecosystem. You have an enabling infrastructure when it comes to listing, whether it was Rasan or any of the other emerging technology companies, generally speaking. Even earlier today, we've been meeting a lot of the entrepreneurs that fuel the future IPO pipeline at the end of the day. I mean, most of the people here, they wouldn't be sitting here and listening unless they had the IPO component in the back of their head. And this couldn't have happened without a successful listing on the Saudi exchange.
Absolutely. Amir and Salman, you have worked on, Rasan IPO and another technology company. So anything to add on this subject?
I think, Ziad, just to say, in all fairness, and we were proud to work with everybody around the panel here on this IPO. This is a groundbreaking transaction in all aspects, and being, the first fintech, insurtech company to list on Tadawul, I think it successfully sets the roadmap for other companies to follow suit. So we took on the first bullet, if you wish, in this process, and it wasn't an easy journey, but I think the results at the end speak for themselves. This IPO was not only covered, it was covered 129 times. So against give or take 800 million, there was 130 billion of demand. And as Abdulaziz said, this was very well represented by all sorts of investors, including international investor, GREs, financial investor, private family offices, etc., fund managers. The other thing I would say is that given the effort that was done in investor education and engagement, we have seen the share price perform in the right way. So back to your question, if you do an IPO, you should expect the share price to continue to perform, because this is creating value, not in the short term, but in the long term, as the company delivers on its business plan and the guidance they have given to investors. The value keeps on creating for the existing and the new shareholders.
I couldn't agree more. And just to add, for me, what I found interesting about Rasan is not only was it the first fintech, not only was it one of the few or first venture-backed companies to go public, but it is not a company that necessarily fits squarely into what we've seen previously in the market. And I think it shows a lot about the maturity of the market. It showed a lot of the maturity of the regulators as well in knowing how to address that. It's a precedent-setting transaction. And I think for us as advisors, there was a lot of communication with the regulators about expectations, because there was not something to draw from. It is a growth company. It is a company that did not necessarily have a long operating history. These are all the types of things that in the past were not the type of companies that were going public in our market. So from my perspective, it really is a great story about what the future holds for our market, and from the expectations of what companies that are emerging companies, that are growth companies, that have not had a long operating history, that have had founders who have been the key decision makers for a long time, and now they're being institutionalized, and what they can do. And as Amir said, their ability to then be successful post-listing in the way that they've grown, I think it's a phenomenal story, and I think it really is showing what the market is capable of, and I think there will be more to come.
Yeah. And success does not come without challenges. And our role is to convert these challenges into opportunity, into success. Khoya Nasser, what are the key challenges you have seen based on over 30 IPOs, mashallah, you have get involved on, and how you make these challenges opportunities for the companies.
I mean, you're absolutely right. Each listing comes with its challenges, obviously. And I think Rasan had many challenges, but I think with a fantastic team, it was easily overcome. And I congratulate the colleagues on this panel on that successful IPO. Generally speaking, and I'm being a bit general because I think the question deserves it being a bit more general per se, is you need to know what are the current challenges or the most common challenges that face companies when they go public, right? And I think Salman touched on one of them, which is corporate governance. Corporate governance is not only something to tick the box, it's a cultural reform within the firm itself. So I think this is challenge number one that needs to be housed in, digested properly, etc. The second most common challenge is around the accounting standards. For public listings, you need to have full of IFRS, audited financials from approved auditors, and I think this is an obstacle or a challenge that all IPOs actually face. But in recent transactions, we've started seeing companies become more understanding and wary of that challenge as well. So if I was going to leave them with two challenges, I think these are the two challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. And Abdulaziz, what makes these projects successful is the ecosystem where you have at the same time the advisors, the shareholders, the regulator actively adding value and working as a team to circumvent the challenges. What's your views on how this ecosystem could go develop further to see more technology companies in the market?
I certainly hope we see a lot more technology companies come. But I would also be cautious because you can't, it's a process that, it's an evolutionary process that you can't really force. It needs to take its time. I hope we can, I think we're overcoming a lot of the regulatory challenges, and it hasn't been easier than today where everyone is collaborating on overcoming these, whether legal or financial challenges or any other challenges the company might face. But it just needs to take its own pace, and rushing into having very high expectations is also a dangerous path to follow. So I would say be on the lookout and expect more, but don't expect it to triple and quadruple in a few months. And things need to take their own time. And we've been empowered by everyone, but we also need to give these companies time to grow and evolve.
Yeah. If you allow me, Ziad, I couldn't agree more. And I think capital markets is, and specifically public offerings and public listings, is just an evolution of a company's growth plans. We believe the VCs, the PEs, obviously are the starting points to prepare such companies to go public, which eventually we believe the capital market is just an outlet to support such VCs and such investment banks and private equities to take any of their companies public as well. Couldn't agree more with Abdulaziz on the fact that it has to be organic. We are not keen on forcing technology IPOs or fintech IPOs. However, from all of the transactions that we've seen here today, we've seen acquisitions, mergers, we've seen MOUs. We believe all of these will eventually fall into place and eventually will hit the market soon.
Yeah. Great. Further. Salman, as a closing remark, we are seeing more and more international companies coming, local companies, technology companies also consider IPOs. What are your top 3 advice for them to have a smooth IPO closing, inshallah?
Sure. But just to maybe address the challenge point, because I do think there's one important component as well that we've seen, and that's very specific to fintech companies, which is the fact that a lot of them are currently incorporated outside of the kingdom. So a lot of them need to re-domicile into the kingdom. What the regulator has done was really to try to ease that. So there were guidelines that were recently published by Tadawul around cross-listing of some of those companies or concurrent listings, which is important. Even though there aren't necessarily precedents in this space for re-domiciling a company or putting in a holdco, there are, MBC was re-domiciled and there are a few other companies. So that's a very, very important, that pre-IPO restructuring. And we've seen that with a lot of companies where there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the pre-IPO restructuring, even before we start talking about a lot of those issues. So it's a challenge, but it's a very, very important thing. I think for me, just in terms of a word of advice that I would give to anyone that's going public, and I think this is hugely important, the IPO is the event. It's obviously the main event, but what's really much more important than the IPO itself is what life is going to be post-IPO, right? The IPO is the wedding, right? Everybody's planning for that wedding. Everybody's there for the wedding, right? You've got the wedding planner, you've got the caterers, you've got everybody excited. However, the next day, the management and the shareholders have to live together, right? And it really is a Catholic marriage. It's very hard to get out of. So this is an ongoing thing. So you really have to think about it from very early on. As part of the process of preparing, making sure you have the proper internal resources, making sure that you are meeting the disclosure obligations on an ongoing basis. You have the proper internal audit functions. You have the investment relations team in place that can communicate with the shareholders. You've got the legal and compliance, because IPO is just the start of the journey. What happens post-IPO is significantly more important and enduring over a longer period of time.
Yeah. And to make this marriage successful, Akhuya Aziz, anything to add on this, what Salman mentioned?
Of course. Well, the most important thing about marriage is what happens behind closed doors. You need to make sure you're meeting these quarterly expectations, quarter after quarter. So I agree. It's just the beginning, and you need to think it through and make sure you're ready for it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Akhuya Nasser, anything to add on this?
I mean, I couldn't add to what Salman and Abdulaziz mentioned. What I can say is you have an excellent regulatory ecosystem, a supportive regulatory ecosystem. We've leapfrogged within the past couple of years, and you've rightly mentioned, Ziad, a couple of them. I think we had more than 120 listings within the past 5 years. Extraordinary numbers. We're breaking records year after year after year. I think with excellent advisors, with an excellent company, you can definitely utilize capital markets. And couldn't agree more on the challenges or the risks or the considerations that Salman mentioned. And on top of them, I think going to the market is an enabling factor. It supports your growth. It solidifies your position. Many of the fintechs that I see here in front of me today need and require a strong brand, and there is nothing stronger than a publicly scrutinized brand that is listed on the public market, that is scrutinized on a daily basis by investors, by regulators. So I'll leave it with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Amir and Salman?
I think, I would just add more on a positive note that, look, the tech space in Saudi Arabia is flourishing by all means, whether it's on the fundraising perspective or whether on the IPO. We've already seen 2 unicorns come to market, and I'm sure there will be more. I mean, we are aware of many companies that are in final preparation stages to go to the market, whether main market or NMO. I mean, obviously, as we discussed, the choice is theirs. You have a very strong market condition. Investors are very actively engaged, whether local, international. So this is obviously the right time, and we think with all this ecosystem, this is the perfect venue. Saudi Arabia is the perfect venue for fintech and startups to pursue their aspirations, whether to grow or to IPO or otherwise. But they have to have certain key ingredients. Strong management teams, scale and profitability. I think, a lot of the companies are challenged. They want to choose scale versus profitability.
Yeah.
If you want to IPO in Saudi Arabia, profitability is an important factor that people look at. So until you hit that, or it's in the near term, I think you should focus on the readiness and getting your business plan ready. And otherwise, you know, I think if you're ready, this is the right time to tackle the market. Thank you.
Yeah.
If you're ready, come to us. If you feel ready, yeah.
If
you're ready.
Absolutely. On profitability, couldn't agree more. But again, I think that requirement was removed, and I think it was removed to enable growth companies to hit the market. And I think we've seen a couple of successful examples as well.
Path to profitability. You know?
Absolutely. As long as there's a path to profitability, I think
Yes.
obviously you can support that filing.
Thank you so much, gents, for the insightful feedback. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your presence. And we look forward for more successful IPO in the Saudi market, inshallah. Shukran.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, gentlemen.